Hey leader, David Burkus here, organizational psychologist and author of 4 best-selling books on helping teams do their best work ever. And in this video, we're going to talk about why motivation doesn't always last and what you can do to get it to last longer and stronger. No matter how long your tenure as a team leader, you've probably seen it. Motivation can fade. Individual employees who seemed so full of life and so full of zest for the job eventually settle into rhythms and patterns and might even burn out. Teams that were formed with an inspiring mission eventually fall into those regular old habits of teamwork and can become demotivated and disengaged. It happens. It happens in organizations of all sizes. It happens in teams of a variety of different ranges of work. Now, fortunately for you as a leader, there are a few things you can do to diagnose why motivation doesn't last and help turn it around and re-engage and re-inspire your people. And in this video, we're going to look at 4 specific reasons why motivation doesn't last and what you can do to turn it around. And it's all based on decades of social science and organizational psychology research, some of which has gotten some attention in the professional world and a lot of which is overlooked. Let's get started. Now, the first thing that demotivates a lot of employees is the belief that they just can't do it, right? They were excited about the job. They even went through the primary training. And as they started to put in the effort, they just started failing. And they don't believe that putting in any more effort will mean that they do the job any better. This could be a training issue or a resources issue, right? It could be that they didn't get sufficient training. It could be that they know what they need to do. And every time they try and collaborate with other people on your team or elsewhere in the organization, they end up not being able to get what they need resource-wise to do the job. And so gradually they become demotivated because their effort doesn't matter if it's in this larger pool of mediocrity. But I suspect that a lot of the reasons people become demotivated in this regard is actually the result of what we could call a fixed mindset. Right? Carol Dweck is a brilliant researcher who's emphasized the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. A fixed mindset believes that knowledge, skills, and abilities are relatively fixed. And so as you threw demands at that person, they felt in over their head with no ability to grow in any of the areas, any of the skills or abilities that they would need to do the job. And as a leader, then it becomes your job. Yeah, you got to take care of the training and resources issues if you can, but it also becomes your job to help instill a growth mindset on those individuals and on the whole team. The best way to do this would be to just calmly ask them questions about other areas of their life where they were frustrated or didn't feel like they could succeed and gradually grew to overcome those challenges. Now, as you do this, as you start shifting someone's mindsets to fixed versus growth, you start instilling in them a belief that they can do the job, and you start turning around that demotivating belief that they can no longer do it or it doesn't matter how much effort that they put in. And not only does this decrease the demotivation, it increases the motivation they have for the task. In the best of all scenarios, as they grow, they become inspired not just by the job at hand, but by the fact that they are growing and developing as a person as well. Now, that actually provides a nice segue into the second reason people can become demotivated, and that is they don't believe it will work. And what I mean by work here isn't they don't believe if they put in the effort, they can increase performance. It's that they don't believe that the thing they're called upon to do is actually solving any problems. They don't believe that it's creating any value for the organization. Their work lacks a certain element of task significance. It lacks the ability to see how their job fits into the larger whole. And this is actually something that was, sort of destined to happen. As we increase in specialization, as our tasks become much less of a diverse bundle and much more focused on one individual task or skill, it could become very easy to lose sight of the larger whole, that larger thing that the organization is producing, that larger value that they create in the world. And as a leader, if you feel like your team or an individual on your team is suffering from this, don't believe it will work because it won't necessarily solve that problem. It becomes your job to show them that larger whole. I find a lot of times teams can keep sight of how their work helps each other, but can lose sight of how that team's work serves that larger organizational purpose. Now, for you, that might be sharing stories of success stories, whether that's customer stories or internal customer stories. It might be demonstrating the way in which their tasks get iterated in the next round, whoever they're handing that work off to. It varies a lot by the industry that you're in and the team that you're on. But there's a good chance that one of the reasons motivation is fading on your team is that people don't see how the work that they're doing fits into that larger puzzle piece of the organization and hence solves actual problems or creates any real value. They feel like it's repetitive. They feel like it's meaningless. And as a leader, it's actually not that hard to go out into the larger organization or the larger industry and capture those stories and bring them back so that they will motivate individuals and your whole team. Now, the third reason that your team or an individual on your team might become demotivated is that they don't believe they're progressing. It's an interesting thing. There's a disconnect between what actually motivates humans and what a lot of managers say motivates humans. We've known for decades that progress is a potent human motivator, that the feeling that we are making progress towards a goal, or the feeling that we're making progress in our career, or even that just we're working for an organization that's making progress towards some larger cause, all of those things can become massive motivators for individuals and for teams. Even small incremental wins that demonstrate progress can have a lasting motivational effect. But if you ask most managers what motivates people, they say things like bonuses, incentive compensations, goals. Goals are great. Goals apart from progress are really just random statements on a piece of paper or a poster or something like that in your office. They don't actually have any motivating effect apart from progress. Even incentive compensation schemes don't really have that motivating effect if people don't believe they can make any progress towards the incentive compensation. It's actually pretty easy and relatively inexpensive to demonstrate progress. You just have to go back on the team and show wins that they might have forgotten about, that remind them just how far back they were when they started. Or you have to look ahead 6 months or a year, whatever the goals timeline was, and figure out what the milestones are that you could use as markers, as indicators of progress down the road. This is something that we ignore often because we're so focused on doing the work that we forget to celebrate those small wins and mark progress in the work as well. But if we do that, we can turn around one of the most demotivating things for individuals and teams, which is that feeling of stagnation. Progress is a potent human motivator. We just need to make sure that we're demonstrating that progress early and often as a team works together. And that brings us to our final element of what could demotivate an individual or a team, which is that they don't believe it matters. There's a lot of work, even in 2020, even after decades of talking about purpose and the need to start with why and then the need to infuse and become a purpose-driven organization. There's still a lot of jobs and a lot of organizations that either have a mission statement that is so bland and generic it doesn't actually motivate people, or have never even bothered to set down, this is what we are fighting for, this is what we're doing as an organization. Now, if you're a small business owner or an entrepreneur, you can change that today. You can declare what it is we're fighting for. You can point out that cause to everyone and capture stories about how the work they do makes the larger world better. If you're leading inside of a larger organization, you probably can't just pull out last year's 10K and rewrite the mission statement, not with any positive consequences. Now, my favorite trick for reversing this, for demonstrating that purpose, doesn't actually require you to change a mission statement or a purpose statement or a vision statement or any of those sort of things. It doesn't involve words at all. It involves people. It doesn't involve why, it involves who. In other words, who benefits? Who do we serve? Now, the reason this is my favorite is that it leverages what's now known as pro-social motivation, the motivation to do a task because you believe it's helping other people. It doesn't need to be a big, elaborate, world-changing mission statement. If it's something as small as how it makes the everyday life of somebody else in the organization or outside the organization better, then it can have a massively motivating effect. If it's just a small example about how the way your company operates makes the environment better or society better, it can have a massively motivating effect. One of the biggest things that demotivates people is that lack of feeling of purpose in their work. And ironically, this might be one of the easier ones to change. If you're familiar with my work, you know that I love the question, what are we fighting for? But the first thing that you could do to make sure your people feel purpose is change that question a little bit and make it, who are we fighting for? Who benefits by the work that we do? Find a way to capture those stories and bring them back to your people as often as you can. You'll find that you've not only changed that one around, right? This belief that it matters, but you have created, in demonstrating that purpose, an easy way to show progress towards that purpose, an easy way to show how it fits into the larger organization, and a reason to help people adopt that growth mindset. There are a number of different reasons that motivation fades, but fortunately, there are just as many ways to turn that around. So whether it's because your people don't believe it'll work, or don't believe that it matters, or don't believe they're making progress, or don't believe that they have any purpose in their work, your job as a leader is to find and diagnose those things. And by pointing out who your team serves, how they serve them, and capturing those regular stories of how the world is a better place because of the work your team does, you'll find that you've not only reversed all of those demotivators, but you've taken your team's motivation to a whole new level. Hey, thanks so much for watching this video all the way to the end. If you liked it, make sure you're subscribed to the channel because we post content like this on a regular basis. And if you really liked it and you want to go deeper, then check out our totally free course, 3 Days to a More Motivated and Aligned Team. It's a totally free video course and you can get it at davidburkus.com/3days. We'll see you there.